Right then, boys, we're back. It's been a while, I've been off. And we're going to start with something nice and simple. A nice little giants tier list. These are not all of the giants in all of D&D, but I think they're all of the ones in the 2014 Monster Manual. I would do the 2024 Monster Manual, but I'm technically already reviewing those one at a time over the next 11 years. So let's start with the Half Ogre. Now this is one that did actually technically get removed in the 2024 manual because of the connotations of it. I think they just changed it to be, they're now called the Ogrelon Ogre, and they come about by magical ritual. Very family friendly. These things suck. I'm not gonna lie. They're kind of, at the end of the day, the ogre already fulfills the role of the ogre. I know that the half ogre is slightly weaker. I think it's a CR1, but your first introduction to large-sized, monstrous dude at level 1 or level 2 or whatever should be the ogre. Right, you're fighting goblins, you're fighting orcs, you're fighting gnolls, whatever, and then here comes Mr. Side Boss, the ogre. So the half ogre, I feel like it has its place. It's not the worst thing in the world. I'm gonna put it in C tier because you can make use of this at very low levels. You could also have some accompanying actual ogres. You can have them as minions for like bigger giants, like hill giants perhaps. But ultimately, I just feel like the ogre does the actual role of this better. And speaking of the ogre, here's the ogre. I have said this multiple times. At least in 2014. I don't think there's any difference between the ogre in 2014 and 2024. I don't know if there might be like a minor difference in terms of stats. But I actually think that the ogre is the most perfectly balanced monster in the game. It's CR2. And I know that the idea of CR and 5e is you're supposed to be to fight like 8 encounters and before taking a long rest, yada yada. But the way I think CR should be, because it's easier to understand, especially for new DMs, is that something that is CR2, for example, should be a decent challenge for a group of level 2 players. And by decent challenge, I mean there should be a chance that at least one of you might go down fighting this thing, right? It's not necessarily a 50-50, but you should have to use resources and really like pull out everything you have in your character sheet to beat this thing. And I think the ogre does that perfectly because I don't think it has multi-attack, but it hits hard. And so I always feel like the ogre is that exact monster that is probably going to down one of your players if you're all level 2, but it won't TPK the group. But it's still that big threat, especially if it's got other minions around it. So I think the ogre, honestly, I'm putting an A tier. I think it's a really good monster. It synergizes really well with other low-level monsters. You can have an ogre accompanying almost any like low-level humanoid monster race like goblins and gnolls and orcs, as I said earlier, or you can have them as these servants of greater giants like hill giants, Ettins, Cyclops. I'm just reading up the list here. Speaking of hill giants, what role does the hill giant play? It's basically the ogre for like a level 5 group. It's probably baby's first huge-sized creature that you're going to come across. It pretty much looks like an ogre in many ways. It does the same stuff as an ogre. It hits you with big club and deals loads of damage. It's dumb. It's strong. That's about it. If you want to have slightly higher level gnolls or slightly higher level orcs or whatever, then this thing does well as like, aha, we're going to unleash Grugnug the Dumb, and he just bursts out of a tent or something and just attacks. That's, it's a frightening experience when you first fight one of these things, even though they're not that threatening, to be honest. I feel like the ogre does it better. Very simplistic. You can have these as the minions of more powerful entities, like green dragons or whatever, or your BBG. But they're kind of just that they're like ogres from Wish. I'm going to put them in B tier. I don't think they're that bad, to be honest. I think they're a good first introduction to actual giants. And if your DM is very descriptive, you can make these things truly terrifying. When I did my last tier list on who I would beat in a fight, the ogre was possible. The hill giant was not possible, right? These things are big enough to knock over buildings and destroy castles and things like that. Like, if you like to use armies and battle tactics in your D&D world, a hill giant is a tremendous siege weapon. Really, really good. Ettin. I don't know about the Ettins, because, again, it basically just does what the ogre does, but not as good. And it kind of does what the hill giant does, but not as good. Esper the Bard made really good use of Ettins in his Brotherhood of Fjalstead series, where it was a bunch of Ettins that attacked the village. I think as like a pack, as a group, they work really well. Also, apparently, Chuth the Green Dragon has Ettin bodyguards, so I guess there's that. I think they're just hill giants with 2 heads. Or, in fact, no, they're just ogres with 2 heads, because I don't even think they're as big as hill giants. I don't know, I'm going to put them in, like... I'm going to put them top of C, higher than half ogres. But I feel like what we have already on the list, right here, is just a bunch of the same. It's just big dude, hit hard, big club. They all kind of fulfill the same role. All of these could be bodyguards for a bigger evil guy, minions or whatever, or they could be like, you know, accompanying weaker forces that have them under their control, like, as again, goblins and orcs and all that. They all just kind of fulfill the same role. Speaking of which, Cyclops. Okay. These guys, on face value, are just ogres with 1 eye. Or hill giants with 1 eye, because I think they're actually huge size. So these are up there with hill giants in terms of size. Same exact sort of thing. They burst out of the trees and they hit you with a tree. Right? The problem with Cyclops is, though, I'm going to put them lower because these things, like, I think they're from Greek mythology. I know they're used in Greek mythology, but I don't know what they actually originate from. But these things are supposed to be mystical beings. Now, 2024 does fix this by introducing the Cyclops Oracle. And it gives, I think it even gives the basic Cyclops a kind of, like a portent ability, if I remember rightly. I'm not looking at the monster manual right now, so this is off the top of my head, where they basically, they have like some divination powers. I think that does improve them. That makes them stand out from the typical dumb hill giant. But in 2014, at the very least, they are literally just a hill giant. There is almost no mechanical difference, other than the fact this thing has bad depth perception because it has 1 eye, so it's literally a shit hill giant. I don't think I'm going to put it in D. I don't know if any of these creatures are going in D, to be fair, because giants are one of those things. A lot of people don't like giants in D&D, especially in 5e, because it's literally just club attack, rock attack. Right? They're just a big dude with a load of hit points, and they whack you really hard. But there's always room for that in D&D. I feel like a Cyclops is still a relatively, like, memorable encounter. It just depends on, like, where you are. I think Cyclopses work better than hill giants as, like, a guardian of some place. Like, maybe they're just guarding the entrance to a dungeon or something like that. So, there's that. I'm going to put them probably middle of C tier, I reckon. Now, the Oni. This is a strange monster because it feels very out of place in the monster manual, as this is very clearly inspired by Japanese mythology. It's literally the Oni. I think in D&D terms, it's a fey ogre, I believe. I might be wrong about that, but I think that's what it is. These things haunt your dreams, your nightmares, they stalk in the night. At the very least, out of all the things we've just gone over, this thing stands out because it has magical powers, right? This is basically like a night hag if they were really big and a dude. Because of that magical power, I have used an Oni before. It did get utterly trounced because my players are level 8. It's really niche Because I don't think an Oni is the sort of monster that you're just going to find in, like, any fantasy setting. It works really well if you're doing, like, an Asian-themed campaign, which is what I was doing at the time, where I had, like, these sort of dark samurai, and there was an Oni stalking this warehouse they had for the magical items in the dark. It's so niche, I don't know. I'm going to put it in C. I'm going to put it at the top of C, because mechanically, this thing is far more interesting than anything else on the list. Far more interesting. But in terms of, like, I like to look at the synergy as well. And all these other things on the list have fantastic synergy with anything else because they're big, dumb brutes. You can use them as enforcers and bodyguards and minions for practically anything you can think of. Onis are not really minions. They might work with something like a night hag, or with demons, or with, like, dark fae, or whatever. Maybe. But I just feel like stylistically they don't fit. I don't know. Oni's a weird one. It's C tier. I'll be fine. Now, I think this thing is officially called a frost giant skeleton. Not just a giant skeleton, but I'm going to call it a giant skeleton because it doesn't matter what type of giant it is. It's a giant skeleton. Obviously, this thing is still big dude with weapon that hits hard. But this is big dude with weapon that hits hard for your undead-themed campaign. And I love undead, okay? I think a frost giant skeleton has got good use, because undead have this problem where there's too many at low level. There's a couple of good ones at high level. You got the Death Knight, Draco Lich, and Lich, and Demi Lich. And there's, like, nothing in the middle. Now, I don't actually think the frost giant skeleton is from the monster manual. I might be wrong. I think it might be from Rhymer the Frost Maiden. I'm not entirely sure. But either way, I think this fills a good role because it's that mid-tier undead, which not only works well as, like, a early boss for, like, you know, level 5 to 6 party or something, fighting one of these things. It's like a really good, like, surprise undead, because up until this point, you've probably been fighting zombies and ghouls and skeletons, all medium-sized creatures, all relatively low level, and then boom, out comes this huge frost giant skeleton that can hit for, like, 30 damage a hit, and it's really powerful. It also works really well as a minion or a bodyguard of something like an actual lich, because the problem with having so many undead at low tier and not enough in the middle is that when you have your high tier undead, like your Death Knights, like your Liches, it's really difficult to find minions for them that will actually function in combat and not just slow the combat down and get in the way. It's all well and good if a Lich has 100 skeletons, right? And it's all well and good if you're using mob tactics to make those skeletons threatening, but one fireball and it's all over. You need minions that are actually going to take hits and deal damage without being too powerful. I honestly think the Frost Giant Skeleton fills that role. I'm going to put it in A tier below the Ogre, but I do think it's actually a really good undead monster. Fomorians. These things are Fey cursed giants, from what I understand. I don't actually know a lot about these guys. They're ugly. They dwell in the Underdark. Mechanically, they do have magical powers, so it does make them better mechanically than your typical hill giant, because they do have, like, curses they can put on you where they make you deformed and they can deal psychic damage and things like that. So I think it's a more mechanically interesting fight than a hill giant, but they are quite niche in a sense. You could have them in a Fae-themed campaign, I suppose. You could have them as random encounters here and there, but I think they're more dependent on their environment, because these things are the sort of thing you'd probably find in, like, the Underdark, deep in caves, you know, very far from society. I don't know if they work as well as your typical big dumb brutes as minions for BBGs, but they do have their place. I'm going to put them in B tier, just below the hill giant. Mechanically better than the hill giant, but synergistically, if that's a word, I do think the hill giant is just easier to use. It's just a better monster. Trolls. Trolls in the dungeon. These things are strange. They're like a step up from the ogres. They have regeneration. If you use the optional rules, they can grow other trolls from their limbs, but it takes so long, it's not even worth thinking about in 5e. I think the problem with trolls is that they are too commonly used to the point where, at least in my games anyway, but almost everyone knows that you can counter a troll's regeneration with fire. Okay? I was watching some YouTuber, I can't remember the name, talking about how his players were trying so hard not to metagame that they ended up metagaming by not using fire against the troll, and the fight lasted 4 hours. Sounds like a made-up story to me, to be honest, but the troll is a good monster. It's a threatening monster. It deals loads of damage. You can stick them almost anywhere. Right? They pop out of a puddle, they pop out of a river, out of the forest, whatever. They're not great as minions. I think they just kind of do their own thing. But they are stronger than an ogre. They are more threatening than an ogre. The regeneration is something that you do actually need to think about. So even if it never uses it because, you've got a wizard with Firebolt, it's still something that you're actively thinking about, because the wizard is thinking, well, instead of using my Witch Bolt or whatever useless ability I have, I'm going to use only my fire spells on this thing because I know that it's weak to fire, and so I know I need to stop that. It at least gets the cogs spinning in people's brains to an extent. So I'm going to put it I'm going to put it just above an ogre. It's a very good monster, really solid, especially for that sort of low to mid-level, like level 5 range. Trolls are very threatening. You can have them in as many numbers as you want. No one's going to question it if there's 10 trolls on the board, right? Or just one troll. It's not like a lich where you kind of only have one. Stone giant. Now I know his head's been cut off by the image here, but this is a stone giant. Stone giants in 5e are a massive letdown, I feel like, kind of like the Cyclops, because these things I think are supposed to be quite wise giants. I don't think they're evil. I think they're actually neutral giants. You're supposed to find them in like arid, rocky areas, even though their skin color, at least in 5e artwork, kind of suggests otherwise. They basically look like frost giants in a way. I know, like 2024 did sort of improve the look to make them look more like they would belong in a kind of arid Grand Canyon style environment. But they're supposed to be to like read the stones, and like they have all this sort of tribal like shamanism and things like that about them, but it's just not reflected in their stat block at all. These things are actually probably one of the most notorious club rock monsters. I know club rock sounds like I'm talking about music here. I'm not. I'm talking about they can club you or they can rock you. And that's all they can do. They haven't really got any abilities. I think they did add a few in 2024 that made them much better, but 2014, ooh, they let themselves down. Do I put them in D tier? I did say no one's going in D tier, but I actually think, I don't think I will, because they're stronger than a hill giant. They're still very, very strong monsters. You can still make good use of them. I think they're a good mid-ranged monster mechanically. It's just they don't have anything interesting going on. So I'm going to put them next to the Cyclops, honestly. Frost Giant. I love the Frost Giant because these things, again, improved in 2024 with their use of, I think they now have a longbow. But Frost Giants, to me, you're never just going to encounter one of these things because they hunt in groups. Right, these guys are hunters and trackers that literally go around the Arctic wilderness hunting down white dragons and mammoths and all these other massive beasts, right? These things are very good warriors, they're very good hunters, trackers. For any winter-themed campaign, Frost Giants are a must in that campaign. They are so good as like a mid-level monster, I think they're CR 8, that any winter-themed campaign, you're going to be encountering these things. And you're usually going to encounter them as a group. Right? Now, I know that they have axe and they have rock. Right? I think that's pretty much all they do. Just like most of the other giants on this list. But if you take a leaf out of the 2024 book and give them ranged weapons, just give them javelins or something, I think they become much more interesting. In terms of giants, I'm going to put them at S tier. In terms of giants. Just because I feel like they got such a presence to them. Right? They're one of the most terrifying giants you can fight because you won't just be fighting them on their own. They're not usually the minions of other things. But they're probably going to have tribal warriors, because that's the thing in 5e. Any kind of Viking, like berserkers and things, probably serving under them. And they may even be quest givers if you're going to fight a white dragon. They're like, yeah, well, let's see if you can prove yourself by hunting that white dragon in the hills or something. I like frost giants. Now, fire giants are a strange one to me, because these things I think work better as a background NPC rather than an actual monster you fight, because these guys, they're very capable warriors, don't get me wrong, but their whole thing is they're kind of like very big dwarves. Okay? They like to live in mountains and volcanoes, and they forge really, really, really powerful weapons and armor. So I honestly feel like the fire giant, just by that nature alone, is gonna be a support character, either to your group as he forges armaments and weapons for you, or to the enemy as he forges armaments and weapons for them. You can have these things as an actual encounter, of course, but they don't really travel like frost giants and stone giants and hill giants and all that. You're more likely to encounter them in their lair, right, in their own dungeon. Obviously, they make for a fantastic dungeon if you want to do a volcano-themed dungeon. You can find some in other fiery realms, like you can find some associated red dragons, very rarely, because giants and dragons don't like each other. You can give them fire elemental minions, you can find them on the plane of fire, you can find them in the Nine Hells, you can find them in the Abyss, anywhere where there's like fire and stuff, you could probably find these guys. But I feel like fire-themed monsters, even though I do believe there's technically more of them than there are winter-themed monsters in the book, I feel like they just don't work together very well because they don't like each other, oddly enough. But I think elementals, salamanders, you can give them, like, give fire giants some minions of those. I think I'm going to put them in A. I'll put them there. I do like the fire giant. I just feel like, again, it's a support giant. You could have a BBEG fire giant. You could have a BBEG of any of these giants, to be honest with you. But they are smiths. They are forgers of mighty armaments. And you're probably going to encounter these guys on your way to killing a dragon, right? Maybe you could have these guys forge a dragon-slaying spear or something for your group to kill a red dragon. Cloud giants. These things are storm giants from Wish. They sit in the clouds. You would think they'd be the top of the ordering because they're in the sky. But they kind of just float around in their clouds and their cloud temples. They don't really do a lot. I'm not going to lie. So they do have spellcasting, which puts them mechanically above most of the other giants on this list. They would be above the frost giant, because the frost giant, again, falls the victim of just hit and throw. But to be honest, so does the cloud giant. Yes, it has things like fog cloud and misty step and some other spells. But the most effective thing you can do with these guys is just, they have a morning star, so you hit things with the morning star and you throw rock. I feel like cloud giants you're not really going to encounter as random encounters. They're not on the ground, to be honest. So you're not going to run into them in the Arctic wilderness. You're not going to run into them into like a forest or a hillland. Hillland. What am I on about? In the hills. You're not going to run into them in volcanoes. You basically have to seek these guys out to ever actually find a cloud giant, because they like to just be above everything. They can work as NPCs for your campaign. They're supposed to be quite wise, quite intelligent, though a little bit arrogant, I believe. They're not the worst thing in the world. I'm going to put them in A, just because out of all the main giants we discussed so far, frost, fire, cloud, hill, all that type of thing, these guys do at least have magical powers, right? They do at least have that going for them. You can give them some air elemental minions. The environment, if you are going to fight these things, is going to be really, really deadly because you're in the air. Usually. You might be fighting them on top of a cloud, and they might just decide to unsolidify the cloud, like a silver dragon can do, and you just fall out of the sky. They are powerful. They're very strong, very threatening, but I just feel like they have the same problem that like the half ogre has compared to the actual ogre. In that this thing, as I said earlier, it's a storm giant from Wish. Speaking of storm giant, I think these are the best giants. I can't remember if they have spell casting, but they do have a lightning strike, which does a lot of damage. I believe it's like 55 lightning damage. These things, they're not actually evil. I think Storm Giants, despite being the top of the Ordning, I think are actually good giants. I can't remember. But these are the strongest giants. I think they're CR 13. They are actually really strong for their CR as well. They're not a legendary creature, but they hit hard. They have loads of hit points. They got the lightning attacks. And because you'll usually find these things in the sea or on the coast, that lightning, if you use the optional rule of making lightning more powerful when you're in water, like Baldur's Gate 3 does, could really make these things hit hard. Like, one of the optional rules I use is that if you are in water, you have disadvantage on dexterity checks against lightning-based abilities, and you take double damage to it. Right? Unless you are resistant or immune, you are considered vulnerable to it, essentially. And so that 55 lightning damage could become 110, which is really, really good. I think they work well as a BBG, if you do want to make them evil, because unlike metallic dragons, I feel like the alignment of giants isn't as set in stone. Right? The whole point of metallic dragons is they are supposed to be the good guys. Storm giants, I know they are, I think, considered good, but you can very easily have an evil storm giant, and no one's really going to question it. Right? You could just have a storm giant whose whole thing is, I am going to summon a storm that lasts forever. Also, job done. There we are. BBEG material. Your coastal village is going to get destroyed by a tsunami because there's storm giants around. Anything like that. That's about it. The thing about the giants is there's not really a lot to say about them. Like the dragons, they are... Almost all of these are just hit hard, throw rock. Right? Some of them have some nice flavor to them, like the frost giants. Some of them have some decent mechanics, like Storm and Cloud. Most of these dudes, they whack you and you die. Job done.